Hello, friends. I want to talk to you today about this book by Lamorna Ash. Some of you might have seen that I posted a few days ago that I've just seen some interviews that Lamorna has done with a couple of quite popular podcasts with a lot of attention, a lot of views. Don't forget, we're here forever. A new generation search for religion. And I just think it's a wonderful book. I ordered it as soon as I saw the interviews with her because, she's talking about some very similar issues going on about religion in Britain today. She's interested in spiritual formation. She's interested in how Christianity values and culture still affect us, still affect all of us and our culture, even if we're not actually nominally Christian. She's interested in the experience of her generation, of her age group, but she specifically focuses on people in their 20s and 30s. Um, and she talks about some interviews, she's done this Christian road trip that she calls it over the last year or two. And she actually talked about 60 interviews, which is it's just really interesting, isn't it? The kind of the similarities that I'm picking up. Well, she's a lesbian as well. Um, and she's been to many of the places I've been to. She's been to the island of Iona. She's been to St. Binos in North Wales, a Jesuit place with Gerard Manley Hopkins. I've been there for a week, which I did as well. I was a bit older than her doing this. I did this in my the late 30s maybe. She's about 28 now. Um, and she's visited all these different churches, and I mean, like I did, I went to an Orthodox church and a spiritualist church, and just really as an anthropological exercise, and that's exactly what she's doing here. This is like an ethnography, really, of young people's experiences of Christian faith in Britain today. So it's 2025, it's just come out in the last month. I've had it about a week, and as you can see, I've been reading it in some detail. And I think it's worth just telling you about it and strongly recommending that you go and get a copy. It comes in three parts, and I haven't read part three yet. And I thought, well, there's enough in part one and part two for me to recommend it. So I don't want to spoil the ending for you. Um, uh, um, to see where it gets to. But there's a couple of things that I want to tell you about why I think it's important. Um, one is this idea that I've already mentioned about the themes that I've been raising around how do we provide structure and guidance and direction within our Quaker communities to help people develop spiritually, really looking at spiritual formation. And she talks a lot about that, specifically looking at people in their 20s and 30s. And I know for me it's an age thing rather than a generational thing, that resonates with me. But I'm 53 now, so I'm good. What is it, 24 years older than her? She's 28. Um, so there's that, but there's also, I mean, the reason for you to buy this book as a Quaker is just how much she talks about Quakers. I mean, as a service to us, as a faith community, um, every person reading this book will get a huge education on Quakers. You can see that I've highlighted in orange the whole chapter that she has put. There's 17 pages in this book on Quakers. 17 pages. Um, I think that's quite significant. I mean, she gives Quakers an extremely prominent role in what she calls the varied landscape of contemporary Christianity in Britain. She gives us a significant role. She gives us a central place in this book, which is perhaps, not particularly fair. But, she has a section where she talks about in Britain, the lightning strike has gone like this. Roman Christianity arrived in Britain by way of St. Augustine in 597. And another sentence later, the Protestant denominations of Baptist, Quaker, and Methodist were all fashioned by Englishmen. So she's putting Quakers right at the heart of the story. Then the very next paragraph, Quakerism emerged out of the turbulent period of the English Civil War. And on she goes, a whole long, long paragraph about Quakers. And she talks about evangelicalism, Pentecostalism. She talks about Orthodox Christianity, the revival period and Wesley, you know, and all throughout this, she's talking about Quakers. She particularly looks at the link between the divide now is between the liberal and conservative forms of Christianity. The divide is cross-denominational, she says. You will find both liberal and conservative Methodist, Baptist, and Catholic churches. Probably you will only find liberal Quaker meetings. But again, she puts us right at the heart of this whole thing. And this I do think is quite unusual and interesting to read it. So I think in kind of summary of what she's getting at, I've put kind of 4 points really of the summary that I think um, certainly part one and part two. First of all, she talks about religion still matters. And that's music to my ears. I mean, I really do chime with a lot of what she's finding here. Religion is still giving meaning to young people. She gives Quakers an enormous role, as I've said, and to talk a bit more about that, she talks through and teaches people about what a meeting is. She talks about what ministry is. She references Quaker faith and practice. She's got a lovely quote from Joe Vellicott, for example, in there. And she talks about being changed by the experience as you go through the book. And because she went to Quaker meeting for such a long time, she went to the Muswell Hill meeting, um, and she talks about it and refers back to it. It's quite an autobiographical nature. So as you listen to her experiences of various other places, she's always thinking about the silence and referring it back to what she got from Quakers. Now, the key thing, which I suppose what really attracts me to this book and this story, is that she also notices that there's not enough for her in Quaker meeting. She talks about in her diary when she would record what happened at that particular Christian service she went to today, or Quakers. No one spoke at Quakers today, and she says that that's actually a repeated thing in her diary about Quakers. Um, and she talks a bit about, I waited in the silence, but the silence was too full of me. I didn't consider the possibility of a communal silence. I didn't know how to look for anything like that. And because there's no instruction and no guidance, she says. And she talks through a whole example of what happens in meeting. And she says, there was someone digging in the garden and there was metal clanging of a spade and it was all disturbing her. But she says no one else was reacting to this. Their eyes were closed. They were somewhere I could not reach. So she really talks about, in the end, the Quaker silence is not enough for her. There's not enough structure, there's not enough guidance, um, and perhaps not enough Christianity, not enough Jesus, as well. But I think that's all the kinds of things that I've been talking about. So there's really a lot of reasons why I suggest you go and read this. And it makes me think, have you heard of that story of um, back in the 80s when we used to put milk bottles out and the milkman would bring them and they'd have those little silver gold tops. And once Blue Tits learned how to get in there and get the cream, and you'd come out in the morning and there'd be a little hole, wouldn't there? For those of us who remember such things. And I remember hearing this fascinating thing that once Blue Tits learned how to do that, Blue Tits across the country all started doing it. Like that's just I mean that just blows my mind really. Um, But it feels a bit like that, is that there's something in the water. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've been doing these interviews and I've been, uh, I suppose, moved to start these kinds of conversations and ask these questions. And there's something going on, that this is exactly um, along the same lines. Um, Now, I said at the beginning that this is about an age-related exploration of people in their 20s and 30s, but it is also generational. And I think a lot of young Quakers will resonate with what she's saying. She's coming at this with a hugely LGBT inclusive approach. Um, and it is written by a 28-year-old, and I'm very aware of that. So I think you will look at it how you read it for yourself. Um, and she does think she's got something to say to the church about inclusion, which I'm sure is going to resonate for a lot of Quakers. Um, so yeah, great book. I really recommend it. I mean, I just think every meeting should have one. It's very readable, and it encourages to think about what's going on in our meetings, what's going on for our young people, and for all of us who sit in meetings and we have people arrive and they sit with us in the silence. How are we guiding them? Um, how are we making sure that they understand, even if this is the only time they ever come, that they go away thinking that they understand something of what we offer? So yeah, that's I really hope the Quaker Bookshop is planning to get some copies in because we've got yearly meeting in just a couple of weeks. I'm very much preparing heart and mind for that, as I'm sure you are. So yeah, I'm going to make sure that they've got it in the bookshop if I can. So yeah, so I hope you get it and see you all soon.